Welcome to the Hello Flow podcast, a space where we bridge together professional success and career alignment with personal well-being. I'm your host, Casey Cunliffe. Join me in conversations around driving your career while also being mindful of your overall well-being. At a time when many people are awakening to their soul's purpose and navigating that messy but magical middle, I offer this space for personal and professional growth and alignment, and a place to ground and support you in your daily grind. After tuning into this podcast, I hope you receive the empowering counsel and actionable tools to usher in more ease and flow in your life, and equip you as you discover, develop, and evolve your Dharma. Now on to the episode. Today's guest is a good friend of mine who also happens to be a global figure in the hip-hop scene, the legendary DJ Neil Armstrong. Hear his story as he navigated from a traditional job with a chemical engineering degree to a turntablist, global battle DJ, mixtape maker, and tour DJ for JayZ. How his initiative, connections he made, the ability to create a supportive environment for himself, and serendipitous moments from the universe gave him the opportunities to pave a path that has made him one of the most successful DJs in the world. He made his mark by doing things that were different from the crowd, including creating his highly esteemed mixtape collection, which got him worldwide fame that led him to stepping stone opportunities from touring with JayZ to becoming Adidas's first urban ambassador to playing at the Obama presidential inauguration. I loved hearing him tell his story and connecting the dots to how someone follows their dharmic path, including building a foundation, finding his flow, being forced to figure out what he wanted to do next after hitting several obstacles, to reinventing himself and pivoting through several transitions. He has a deeply inspiring, deeply informative, and incredibly fascinating journey that I can't wait for you to hear all about. Welcome to the Hello Flow podcast, Neil.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
Yep, sure.
So in this series, I'm inviting guests to talk about your story and what were all of the pivot points, highlights, expectations maybe growing up. What were some of your experiences, educational experiences that drove your decisions in terms of what you ultimately did for a living and as a creative as well?
All right. Yeah, I could do that. Okay, so I was lucky enough to be born in New York City during the golden era of hip-hop. So let's say when I was in high school was 1988 to 1992. And that was like when Public Enemy's first album came out. Wait, not first, second. Takes a Nation of Millions. So I think that's their second. Yeah, Yo Bum Rush's Show's his first one. Like De La Soul's first album came out. Slick Rick's first album came out. So what is generally known as like this, pinnacle of hip-hop. That's what I grew up with, right? When you're in high school, that tends to be what you latch onto. If you're a metalhead, you're going to be a metalhead for the rest of your life, like kind of like that. So that love of the music just, it just captured me. And it got to a point where later on in life, I didn't want to be a spectator, I guess. So I started DJing. How I came to start DJing was pretty interesting. I went to this DJ battle called the New Music Seminar, Superman battle, run by a guy named DJ Clark Kent. And I always screw up the years, but this might have been like 1994. So this is when I'm in college already. And a kid named Shortcut, who's a Filipino kid from the Bay Area, was competing. And at the time, hip-hop wasn't what it is today. Like, it was a very small subgenre that most people thought would be just a fad. It was mostly Black and Latino kids, as far as culturally in New York, who were really into it. Not that things were segregated, but they just, other kids didn't always listen to that stuff. There was a couple of us. And then, I see this kid that kind of looks like me on this stage, and no one cared. They just cared how good he was. So maybe the first time I really saw like a kind of a meritocracy type situation, it didn't matter. Like as long as you kill it, they're going to love you and accept you. And I was a nerdy kid. Like I went to Bronx Science. College-wise, I have a degree in chemical engineering. I'm not, especially what at the time, what people expected of someone who would be interested in this type of music. And I'm making vast generalizations, of course. There's plenty of nerds like Zentronic, and I don't even remember his real, he's a writer. Who else would be Oliver Wang? Like there's a lot of, but I was there, like in the trenches. I've been in ciphers with my backpack on with Mos Def and all these people. So I wasn't separated from the culture. And consequently, a lot of my friends from high school, if you look at pictures of me, is like all Black kids and Latino kids. So fast forward to college, I see this kid killing it. And I was like, all right, that's what I want to do. If he could do it, I could do this. And who knows? If the situation was different, maybe if I hung out with more B-boys, maybe I'd try to have been a Jabberwocky. Or honestly, musically, because of my sister, who was like 4 years older than me, right? So that's like a generation older, right? Because high school is 4 years, college is 4 years. She almost strictly listened to what is generally known as New Wave. So I was 11 years old listening to the Smiths and New Order and a bunch of like really emo things. And if I was maybe like in California or somewhere else, I'm sure I'd be like an emo surfer dude or something crazy like that. But yeah, hip hop just like pulled me in, and I had nothing I could do about that. So how it transitions into a job, if I really think back, that wasn't in my mind. There was no such thing as a career DJ, or you wouldn't hear like a DJ that makes $1 million, like a AM, or like Vice, or who works in Vegas. Like these things didn't exist. It was a very young part of the gestation. Like I said, this is the golden era, right? So although there's a stamp, right, that hip hop started in 73, it's still a baby. 20 years old, that's still a baby. That's not full, we're still 50 years old is maybe now it's mature. That's 20 years is nothing. And it was constantly evolving still at the time, even the music, right? If you listen to the earlier stuff, it sounds like electro, freestyle. And, the rhyme schemes are not very elaborate. By the time I got into it, that was when Nas was out and Brand Nubian, and, literally, so Public Enemy represented, put your fist in the air. De La Soul was these weirdos, borderline hippies. And Slick Rick was, gold chain out, like that, representing all these sides of hip hop that, evolved to that point. At the time, I was studying chemical engineering, and I end up going to Hong Kong, which is really weird. I was just there, so I was just thinking about all these little stories. Because I had an educational background, as a chemical engineer, I could write. I think, unfortunately, hip hop is music of disaffected youth. Often they don't go to school, or they didn't have the opportunity, so they don't have that, some of them just, they don't know how to write very well. Or at least like how journalists want you to write. But I could. So actually I ended up linking up with some of the early hip hop web magazines. Like, remember, this is 94. Like, there's no, like, email's brand new. The internet as we know it, there's no Facebook, there's no Google, this is Alta Vista. This is an entirely different time period. So this idea of aggregating, we how do we get our information? It's just our feeds, right? That doesn't exist. You got to search all this stuff back then. And there was a magazine called The Guillotine. I ended up linking up with them. I probably just wrote them an email. I was like, I write. So I end up, in that crew was a guy named Mums the Schemer. I don't know if you know who he is, but unfortunately he passed away recently, but he was in a bunch of movies. He was in Def Poetry Jam and all that type of stuff. The woman that I worked with at the time, her name was Shaki. She was the one who was trying to put it together. And again, there wasn't a lot of Asian people operating, not in New York. On the West Coast, the Bay is entirely different story. LA, different story. Like, they already had Icy Ice on the radio. Like, to this day, there's not a lot of Asian DJs on the radio. Like, we're just not there, right? So I link up with them. I tell them I'm going to Hong Kong. I want to do a article about how hip hop has permeated that far into Asia. Again, no K-pop at the time. It's a different time period. I end up somehow, universe, I'm on the subway, and I end up meeting like the DMC champions from like the past 4 years on the train, because I saw this kid with a Techniques turntable shirt, and thankfully one of them could speak English well enough. His name was DJ B.
And for those who don't know what DMC championships, can you explain that?
The DMC is a championship, like I don't know, whatever. The NBA, the NFL of turntablism, especially at the time. They would set up DJ battles. Initially, they were just mixing battles, but they evolved once they started bringing in the hip-hop DJs who were doing like all these scratches and cut, like that kind of typical, like, oh, they're backspinning, right? Like that. And that all happened because the American DJs started coming over and winning. And there's two areas that usually would come over: Philadelphia, New York, and later on, like a dude from California named Aladdin from LA. But yeah, the Philly cats, the New York cats, they would go over there. And at the same time, they would have these other battles at New Music Seminar where I met Shortcut, and DJ Honda from Japan would come over, and the European dudes would come over. So hip hop was just, growing. And can you imagine, like, there's no internet, there's no YouTube, it's just word of mouth, or very often, like, the military would bring this stuff over, and that's how these kids 2 million miles away from New York would learn about this culture and just, gravitate, just like what happened to me. So I end up hanging out with these DMC champions, and somehow at the same time, there was this massive, like, growth in the DJ turntablist world. So turntablism, that term wasn't even coined at the time, and it often gets attributed to a DJ named Babu, and he used it to mean like using the turntable as an instrument, because there was this point at the time when there were people who were doing showy things, and literally there was a guy named DJ David who got up on the turntable and did a hand spin. And of course, if you've never seen something like that before, you're like, what the heck is going on? And this guy wins this competition. And he beat a guy named Qbert, who historically is he's like the Jimi Hendrix of turntablism, of scratching. and he beats him. So there was this almost this movement, this backlash of like, you know, this all this showy stuff is crap. It's not art. It's not whatever. It's just show for show. And then that's where that term came from. And this was all gestating at the same time that I was coming into it. So
the term turntablism came from that moment.
From that time period, yes, okay. From that time period. Now, you know, there's people who argue that no, someone said it in the 80s, in the 70s, but I don't know. So yeah, turntablism comes about at that time period as far as history has been agreed upon. And when I'm in Hong Kong, I end up hanging out with these guys every night. I'm not Neil Armstrong yet. I went to Hong Kong not specifically for that. I went because my college had started an exchange program. So I was there doing, what was it called? Microfabrication on like silicon chips. So the work that I was actually doing was probably used to create the situation now, like where you have like, you know, before, who knows, like these transistors or these microchips are like this big, like now they're whatever. Mm-hmm. So I did work on that. That's what my real purpose of being there was, to do that. But I would sneak away any moment I got, and I would go hang out with these kids who, just like in New York, there was this weird cross section of like, if you were into skate, like we hung out at a skateboard shop called BFD. So it was the skateboard kids, hip hop kids, and the DJ kids, like in particular. And just so happens, Qbert, Shortcut are also creating the first DJ battle mixer at this time. And they're in Taiwan. So I go to Taiwan with my homies, kind of not realizing it's really another country. Thankfully, my mother was like, yeah, go ahead, whatever you want. You know, if I want you to have a great experience.
Battle Mixer is an event.
No. Previous to this time period, the equipment that we had was not made for what we do. Like these mixers used to be like this big with 5 channels. Sometimes they would have rotary mixers like knobs instead of faders. Mm-hmm. Shortcut, Qbert, and I learned later a guy named Rhett from LA, all Filipino kids, by the way. They were out there creating a mixer specifically for what we did. And again, that didn't exist before I go meet them out there. It wasn't there. They just weren't there, which is kind of wild when I think about it. I go out there, I meet them. We hang out a little bit. I'm hanging out with Tommy, all the DJs, blah, blah, blah. So I guess word of mouth was really powerful back then. And the kids back home heard, like, oh, I heard Neil hung out with Qbert. I heard Neil hung out with Short. I don't know. That's equivalent of like, you know, a rapper hung out with JayZ. Like literally, that's what it's like. So I get back to New York and everybody thinks I'm like great. Like, wow, this guy Neil must be freaking amazing. And I wasn't. I sucked. I was terrible back then. But this allows me to have a conversation with the guys who end up teaching me how to DJ, who are these guys called the X-Men.
Based out of New York?
Based out of New York, primarily African-American. One of them, I'm pretty sure, identifies as Latino.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's part of the, you know, African diaspora. Yeah. He's super dark. His name's Rob Swift. Shout out to Rob Swift. Rock Raider was part of their crew. A guy named Total Eclipse is part of their crew. A guy named Mr. Sinner is part of their crew. So if you've ever heard the song Resurrection by Common Sense, pretty much all the songs on that album, Mr. Sinister did the scratches for that.
So it's interesting, actually, before you continue, is born and raised New York City, Queens, during the golden era of hip-hop. And out of all of the hip-hop elements, b-boying, graffiti art, DJing, or turntablism, I don't know what you would call it.
Yeah, at the time, there was less of it. We would have just said DJ for sure.
MC.
Right.
Am I missing an element?
Usually there's 4. They
Yeah,
use 4, right? Yeah.
Graffiti art, yeah. So of the 4, you ended up gravitating towards being a DJ because you can see and resonate with someone else that looked like you.
That was a big chunk of it, for sure.
And you ended up meeting and hanging out with that person while you're still in university.
Yes.
And so not yet Neil Armstrong.
No, this is 1994. This is all very quickly.
Yeah.
So an important thing to keep in mind is my ascent from being a civilian, as I like to call it, to being Neil Armstrong was very quick. This is 1994 to 1997. So I go from being a nobody to being part of one of the craziest DJ cliques, ever. So I come back home and I can confidently, not hyperbole, say to the X-Men, like, oh, I was out with Qbert and them cats. And so they think I'm something. But, and I asked them I want to interview them, right? So I end up interviewing them. And there's actually a video of the first time I meet Rock Raider and these guys at a store called Fat Beats. So that's another part of the story that should be included. Fat Beats was this store that happened to be like 2 blocks away from my school. And they started right around the time I started popping up. And at the time, Fat Beats was like the destination. If you were into hip hop, you went to this store. Like that was just the rule at the time. That's what it was. I was there so much that I would just tell people, yo, just give me a call here. I'm probably going to be here because this is pre cell phone. And only people who had pages were drug dealers. And I didn't have one. So yeah. And sure enough, I would get phone calls there, which is kind of trippy when you think about it. So I meet the X-Men while they're doing this video shoot. There is actually a video of me talking to Raider, which is kind of crazy because I don't know if I mentioned, Rock Raider passed away, unfortunately. And I'm telling them, like, yo, I want to interview you guys. Now, at the same time, it turns out there were a couple other Filipino kids who were making a lot of noise in the scene. One of them was named Rolly Roll. The other kid was a kid named Daddy Dog. And the X-Men wanted to meet Rolly because they wanted to essentially see what their competition was, because they heard about him and they're like, oh, okay, we need to see what else is going on out there. So I wasn't really friends with those cats. In fact, I'm pretty sure we talked about it like our own little interview. They were probably making fun of me. We was a geek with the mixer, because I had a nice mixer, right? So they all heard I had this mixer, and they all, well, why does this kid have this mixer and blah, 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 right? And we all end up hanging out. And then very quickly, this is probably like 1996. Next thing you know, we're in these massive DJ battles. Our name as a group gets elevated. Now, as a group, I forgot that part. Me, DJ Daddy Dog, and Rolly Roll form a crew. And we call ourselves the Fifth Platoon. Eventually, we add a female, Cotton Candy, who at the time was dating Rolly. We had another kid named Doughboy who was living in upstate New York. I don't know that if he considered himself from upstate New York. And we start battling everybody. Eventually, we had another kid named Vinrock who ends up moving to the Bay and joins Shortcut in his crew. So we all kind of have like this very close-knit family situation going on. And a lot of us happen to be Filipino. One of the kids was Korean. Daddy Dog is half Arab. I forgot which country he's from. But yeah, it just so happened we were all Filipino. And I think that ends up being kind of very important in our story, because there weren't a lot of Filipinos, especially on the East Coast, doing anything involved in hip-hop on any level besides whatever, some party or something, or trying to MC. And I like to think that we ended up kind of showing younger folk what could be. I think historically most kids who were born here, so like first generation kids, their parents want a better life, so they push them toward becoming a doctor or a nurse or a lawyer, or, those traditional type jobs. And I like to think that we, when kids saw us, they're like, oh, maybe we don't have to do that. There's something else we could do, and we have a place in these spaces where we classically weren't.
Yeah, it's almost like you were mirroring what Qbert and Shortcut did for you, where you saw you saw them and you're like, oh, okay, I look like them, or I resonate with them, and you knew it was possible. Yeah. So then now you are in those shoes where you can inspire others as well.
And I think like actually Qbert, hip hop is a competition sport, especially in New York. I think the Bay Area cats, they had a little bit of a different perspective, or at least Qbert and none did. To explain what I mean, back in the day, like DJs used to hide their records. They would wash off the labels because they didn't want another DJ to have it. Qbert, on the other hand, I asked him in the interview. I wish I had it. That might be ill if I could find it. But basically, he said something along the lines of like, I'm fine if other people copy what I do, because by the time you copy it, I'll have figured out some other thing to do. So why not? Why not share it? And I don't know if we ever had like a discussion, but that was our thing. Like we ended up, whenever there were other crews around, it was never a fight. It was like, oh, let's all hang out. And for a long time, let's say until like 2001, 2002, that's what it was like in New York. Kind of everyone all hanging out with each other and, just trying to really further the art form. So that's where that all happened. Now, turning it into a job, that's interesting. I never thought it would be a job. I don't know if any of my friends did, except for maybe Rolly, because he had been DJing for a long time. Remember, at this point, I'm only DJing for 3 years. Is like my other homies were already like 5-10 years in. There's 3 years. There's nothing new. But I guess my ability to go from 0 to 100 very quickly, I don't know. I guess I was just really lucky to have that situation. And my real job is what allowed me to kind of maneuver in ways that a lot of other people didn't. So I get my degree in chemical engineering. I graduate. I didn't really want to. I wanted to leave. My mom was like, no, you're not. So so I get it. I get a job because of my school. At the time, a lot of my engineering friends were not getting engineering jobs. They were getting internet jobs. So I end up working at Credit Suisse First Boston, now called Credit Suisse. It's a financial institution. And I learned how to program. So even though I never had any formal computer training, I was, logical enough, and I had enough understanding to just learn the syntax and learn how to program. So my first job was really like web development, I guess some people would call it. I used to do a lot of back-end database to front end, like what you guys see nowadays, like, when you type your name in, information shows up. Like I would build things like that for the bank.
So at this point, you graduated with your bachelor's, you started a traditional job,
yes,
and DJing was your passion project and hobby on the side.
I would say it definitely was on the side, but I was very active. And I was at the time making like a good living, you know. I never meant to brag about it, but I would always be like, yeah, I got my first job, I think I got like 50K. And this is back in 97, and that was a big deal back then. 50K for a 24-year-old who had $0 like a week before. Oh, this is freaking great. And yeah, the perks, like those little perks, like going to London, going to whatever. And that was my job. Now, because I knew how to program, I end up, because of my other friends who are around, who were working in like at record labels. So you guys probably have heard of Loud Records. That's Wu-Tang Clan's label. That's Mobb Deep's label. At the time, they didn't have like an in-house tech person, so they couldn't build certain things. My homie, this kid named Chris Seeley, was working there. I don't remember what capacity, probably in the marketing. And he knew I programmed, and he was like, "Yo, Neil, they need to build something." And back in the day, there used to be these things called like bulletin boards. So, yes, in the late 1900s, right? So,
bulletin board,
they were
like
called
cork,
huh?
like with the corkscrews?
No, a bulletin board on the internet. So, maybe like a predating Reddit, I guess, maybe.
Okay.
So like someone would post a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would be this like forum. If someone would post a question, you'd log in, or you could, sometimes you didn't have to, you could be a guest, and whatever. What's your favorite Mobb Deep song? And then you would click it, and then you would reply. That's
Mm-hmm.
it.
Okay.
That's all. There's no graphics. There's no whatever. This is very early internet. And they didn't know anyone who could build that. And I guess my boy was like, "Oh, my boy could do that for you." So I go in, and that introduces me to like these higher level hip hop people. Ultimately, I end up leveraging those connections to kind of push my name. Like, oh, he's also DJ Neil Armstrong. So my name starts floating in these spaces where there's a lot more power, as opposed to like, you know, your homies, like, who don't know anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, these people know people. I end up leaving my job at Credit Suisse Boston, basically becoming like a sysadmin for a side project that the people at Loud Records wanted to start, which essentially would have been like Facebook for hip hop. That's what they were trying to do. Consequently, it failed. So it fails, I think, in maybe like 2000, 2001. And that was a wild ride. I've been sued by my partners in my business. I've lost my job a couple of times. Like, you know, no trip is nice. If it's nice, then I don't know. What did you do? Like, what did you really do if you don't run into any obstacles? But mine was littered with craziness. This forces me into a situation where I need to figure out what I need to do in my life. Because now, you know, at that point, I was making almost 6 figures. So to go from 6 figures to nothing is difficult. Fortunately, my living situation, my cost of living was very low at the time. I was smart enough to buy a house, which set me up for being okay now. You know, as opposed to, you know, I never bought an Escalade, never bought rims, never did stupid stuff with my money. My parents were smart, and I listened to them. So I have a house that at the time I bought for probably $200K, and, you know, in New York, it's worth over $1 million now. You know, listen to your parents sometimes, kids. Listen. So, you know, thankfully I'm in a lot better position than a lot of people were, because my peers were not doing that. They were buying Escalades. They were spending their money on dumb things. So at this point, Vinrock and some of my friends, I don't know what I'm going to do. My DJ name isn't quite as big as it is yet. I haven't found my true niche. I'm no longer battling. And even when at battling didn't generate a lot of income. Like maybe a couple like gig at the maybe you could get a gig here or there, but not like my other job was making. And I end up starting to make mixtapes. And these mixtapes, because I knew people at Loud, because I knew people at XYZ, I was able to, hey, this is a mixtape I'm working on. Right? So at Loud, it's not like I just knew, my bosses. I would hang out with the marketing people, or I'd hang out with whatever. So I end up, one of my friends who he actually went to college with one of the members of my crew and my cousin. His name is Hyun Kim. Hyun, probably one of his more famous things is he wrote an article about Aaliyah that people still reference to this day. He becomes like an advocate for me because he has my mixtapes. So he'll play my stuff at Vibe, and people will be like, oh, what's this? This is my boy Neil. Next thing you know, my mixtapes end up at MTV. So my understanding is at one point my mixtapes were on the MTV server. So anybody who worked there heard my stuff. Eventually, I guess my mixtapes end up getting played at Rockefeller Records. And supposedly that is how I end up working with Jay. So it's all these weird little connections. If I didn't get fired, who knows? Maybe I'd still have my job there. If I didn't, meet my buddy who worked at Loud, maybe I don't have those inroads to get my stuff heard by the right people. There's a lot of, I don't know, luck. There's, I don't know what to call it, serendipity. There's a lot of like little things that go into, any person's success. So eventually, like I just mentioned, I used to DJ for JayZ, and I do know factually, I got confirmation from a third person, my mixtapes were getting played, a lot of play. And the reason why my mixtapes were played, I believe at the time, was because I was doing very different things. I come from a turntablist background, so all my homies were like, we listen to hardcore hip hop, MOP, the Wu-Tang Clan. I was doing like fruitcake things. That's what my boy used to say. Daddy Dog used to laugh at me. He's like, what is this? This is not hard. This is not Wu-Tang. This is just El DeBarge. What's going on here? Or, even like Cranberries. I'd put Coldplay on my mixtapes. I'd do things that, like at the time, people from my world were definitely not doing that. If you look at what's happening now, that's entirely normal. But yeah, like I was doing things that were different. And I think that's what stuck out to people. Like, one of the biggest mixtapes I made was one called Bittersweet. And if you actually get to listen to it, which I hope you do, it kind of tells the story of a relationship. If a boy meeting a girl, vice versa, blah, 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 all the way to breaking up and, trying to resolve what to do in the aftermath. And yeah, I always get really great compliments, whatever. This tape helped me process whatever was going on in my life. It's just something that I think the majority of the world has to deal with in some form or fashion. So those were the things that Rockefeller liked. Not me doing more hardcore things. They wanted to hear like something different. And I end up later on DJing for JayZ and touring with him for like 2 years. Technically from 2008 to 2010. So yeah, so about 2 years. From that, I end up working with Adidas, and I got to do a commercial with them for Star Wars of all things, with me, Snoop Dogg, David Beckham, Noel Gallagher. Wait, Liam or Noel? One of the guys in Oasis. I can't remember which one. Like great, like just really crazy things like that. So I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff. And it all started because I saw these Filipino kids DJing, which is kind of ill.
Wow, what an amazing career. And I know you had mentioned, was it luck? Was it, the universe? I think that one, when you're on your path, when you're doing what you're meant to be doing, one, you are going to experience the obstacles that are meant to kind of push you towards something that maybe you were meant for. Like, is it serendipitous? Yes. But two, I think luck is also created, and for you to go after one, that there is the fact that you are an environment, New York City, and have access to those people, just the physical access and being able to know someone who knows someone. So there is that factor, but also the fact that you were able to take action. You were inspired by someone that that you looked to and knew that there was something possible and different there, and you followed this urge that you had, especially growing up in that golden era of hip hop, and you went after it. So when you look back, at it, it's like, okay, yes, it was luck, but you created that luck in a lot of different ways. And so the era you were born, the city that you lived in, and then you taking action, I see, creating all the different, trails of luck that you had over time. I didn't know about the Adidas commercial. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I got to look that up now.
Cool. yeah, definitely you can find that. That's still up. And I did a couple of commercials in them, but that was the one that I like a lot because the Death Star blows up behind me, which is really fun.
Yeah. And you're like a big Star Wars nerd too.
Oh yeah,
so it's
nerd.
Like even more.
It was great. It was freaking amazing.
And the other thing you haven't mentioned yet was working with the NBA.
Well, yeah, same thing. A lot of everything seems to stem from my mixtape. So, oh my God, what's her name?
Karen Barbara.
Yeah, and Rosario, her partner. Mm-hmm. They were big fans of my mixtapes, and via Adidas or via whatever, I'm pretty sure they, my name got put on their desk. They're like, yeah. Let's get Neil to do it. And it became something I did for almost I guess 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Maybe just about. Something called the Rookie Photo Shoot. I got to do that from, let's see. I think my first one was when Durant came in, and my last one was when Poole came in, I think. So that's, I don't know, something like that, like 10 years. But yeah, and then I did All-Star Weekend multiple times. I think the one difference I had before that a lot of other DJs weren't thinking about, and I can use my buddies as examples. A lot of my DJ friends in New York, like, they were fine getting free drinks at a bar for payment, because that when you're 16 years old, when you're 18 years old, 21 years old, cool. And you're living in your mom's basement, wow, cool, this is the greatest life ever. But they weren't thinking past that. And I kind of believe, I because of my managers, because of the people around, my mixtapes used to get played at a place called at MTV. There was a guy who was working at MTV at the time who was into sneakers and blah, blah, blah. His name's Sky Galatli. He ends up becoming my manager and really not beat me up with it, but he was like, you need to treat what you do like that you're a brand. And now everyone does it. Every influencer is a brand now. Every person is a brand now. But at the time, DJs weren't even branding themselves. And he purposely put me in that place and aligned me in a certain way. So I was doing stuff with Jonathan Mannion, who's the photographer for JayZ's albums, for whatever. I was doing stuff with Futura, who's history with music in New York and art goes as far back as having a song with The Clash back in 1986. He just put me in line with all these people who I wasn't just, whatever, a local DJ. I was now, Neil Armstrong.
Yeah. A global brand.
Yes. And that's why I was able to DJ for Jay, because I had another very powerful advocate. Her name is Vashti Kola. She's one of the first women to have a Jordan. She used to work at Def Jam. And the story that I know to be true is that Jay was looking for someone like A-Track. So A-Track's background is turntablism, like me, right? And A-Track used to DJ for Kanye. And he actually wanted A-Track, but A-Track couldn't do it because he had just stopped working with Kanye and wanted to start Fool's Gold, his own record label. And see, this is what I mean by people's small minds, including myself. At the time, if you DJ for Kanye, you're like, well, this is the best job ever. Why are you leaving? And he had the smarts to be like, no, like, this is just a stepping stone. I want to start my own label. With his label, one of their hugest songs was probably like Barbra Streisand. He's on, he's been on Billboard magazine. That doesn't happen if he's Kanye's DJ and he stays there. So he can't do it. Jay asked Vashti, like, who should I get? And she's like, you need to get Neil. He does that, blah, blah, blah. He does this. He's homies with this person, blah, blah, blah. He was just in this he was in Vibe magazine with, like, there's a picture of me with, at the time, these are all mixtape DJs, right? So it's me, DJ Vlad, who starts Vlad TV. On the other side, who was the other dude? DJ Drama, who, I don't know if he did, like, DJ Drama, I mean, DJ, right. I think his latest acquisition was like Jack Harlow. Like, I'm in pictures with these fools, right? These are people I'm messing with, but this is when we're all just mixtape DJs. So Vashti's like, yeah, you need to get Neil, and then that's it. That's how I end up there. And it was, again, my manager and the people I was aligning with really taught me that you have to have a kind of a bigger mindset and understand what you are there to offer, at least on the business side. And this is also kind of the beginning of influencer culture. This is pre-Instagram, pre that type of social media, and that's really why I end up working for Adidas, because I say this, I'm serious. I'm a humble dude, right? You know this, right? My job with Adidas was, before they got Kanye, I represented streetwear culture, that part. That was my job.
Did not know that.
Because that's who I was aligned with, all these other people. Now, absolutely, I did not sell $1 billion worth of sneakers. and my time with Adidas coincides with Kanye's. So it's really interesting to see, just as an insider, how big Adidas got after they got someone like Kanye. So on the side of and I can send you this picture, remind me, on the side of the Portland Adidas office was a picture of me, Snoop Dogg, I forgot who else is in the picture, and Beckham. Like, I was there's a picture of me on the side of this building, 3 stories high. Like, yeah, with these gods. Yeah, that was my job. That was my job with Adidas at the time, which is, again, pretty wild.
It was like you were the influencer before influencers
definitely.
became a thing.
It's terrible what the term has become, but yes, that was my job. I was not just a DJ, I was an influencer. A lot of the stuff that now is like really frowned upon, I wasn't just DJing. I was there wearing Adidas clothes. Right. I was wearing blah, blah, blah. I was there posting up whatever. I was video logging before they had selfie cameras. Like, I wish I have all this video footage from when I was on tour with Jay, and it's just me going to the bus. Yo, we're making sandwiches, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it, I was like, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? But I was doing it. And I remember I stopped doing it actually because people were looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Yeah.
And I was like,
I
yeah,
think
you're
I
right.
remember this. I think didn't you do something similar for a car brand?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
I've done some
Yes.
conference. That was what they hired me for
Mhm.
because I was Neil Armstrong. That was the gestation of that time
Mhm.
period. But yeah, nowadays I think it's a kind of a bad word, unfortunately, and it deservedly so. I think it's been you know, just especially like you have like these food influencers going to a restaurant being like, well, I shouldn't pay for my food because I'm going to help you get blah blah blah. And like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, that's not what it was meant for. But
so what I'm also hearing too, as you continue your story, is that as you're along your path, one, sorry, I had it in my head. I already forgot. Mentorship and advocates, and how that really opened the doors for you, not only with your manager, Vashti, just people knowing you, all tying back to you creating mixtapes that was very different. That's what differentiated yourself. From
if you wanted to
to
distill everything down into a couple of words, absolutely.
Yes.
I think it's very important to align yourselves with like-minded people who understand the business side of what you're trying to do. Because that is one thing that is tough. Like that's one reason why it is good for someone at a certain level to have a manager. Because business is hard when you're like someone like me who kind of wants everyone to, I want to get along with everybody. Unfortunately, money is a tough thing to work with sometimes. So that's why you need a manager, or it's helpful to have one. But yeah, I was very lucky to have a lot of advocates in my life that helped me attain the level that I did. Now, going forward post-COVID, as I was telling you before, like life is a little different now. Actually, a lot of my, hear about like, oh, you should have a 5-year plan or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like I had all these plans. I think especially when you're in a creative field, you need to learn how to pivot. And I learned early on that like my style of DJing, like I'm almost 50 years old. Like I'm not trying to party. Like kids don't want to party with my ass. Like that's just facts. So that's fine. So for example, I started Dinner and a Mixtape. So Dinner and a Mixtapes was like the usual thing with DJs was to always complain that, oh, these venues they play stupid music, they're playing EDM, blah, blah, blah. But like, what do you think was going to happen? Like, you're 40 years old, you're 45 years old. Our friends aren't going out. They have kids, they have families, they have jobs. They're not trying to go out on a Wednesday and stay out until 5 a.m. So Dinner and a Mixtape was like a way for me to do what I do, but bring it to a more palpable venue, right? So when I did that, like I guess 10 years ago now, most of the people around wanted, still our generation is different. Like they still want to kind of go out and listen to good music, but they don't want to do it at 2 a.m. With a bunch of drunk people around. They do go to dinner every night. And when you're at dinner and you spend easily $100, if I am like, I go to them and I'm like, well, the music you're listening to is something I made. And it costs $20. Oh, yeah. This is great. I love this. That's easy. That's an easy sale. But if you walk up to someone and like, oh, here's a mixtape I did. It's $20. I can go to Spotify. Well, not now, but at the time, it cost me $7 and I get unlimited music. Why am I going to get this? So, yeah, I built this whole thing around kind of doing it like that, as opposed to like a DJ who might just complain like, I can't play my music at the right place. Like I tried to find the right place, and it was going great. It was going amazing. I got to the point where we had Remy Martin on board, and we were going to turn it into kind of a very global event. We were going to do one in New York, LA, Toronto, Vancouver, and finish it off at the headquarters in Paris. And then COVID hit. And the people I was involved with, they pivoted. I don't even think they're involved in marketing anymore. Everything just changed. And then I had a kid. I had a baby. So now my brain has changed. Even for like the last, let's say 5-6 years, the majority of my money, even though I made those mixtapes, the majority of my money came from touring. And now that I have a daughter, I don't really want to tour anymore. Maybe one day, but not right now, not while she's a baby. I want to spend as much time with her as I can. Because she's already at the point where she won't even let me hug her anymore. So I know I have a very small window of time to kind of do those type of things. So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's next.
Yeah. I love how through you telling us your story, it's really clear how you've evolved, how what you're offering to those who are your fans, to the world in general, how much that you can still take a craft and deliver it in a lot of different ways. And so now, since you're at another point of transition, what's sort of next for you, or what are you thinking?
It's really tough. Y'all are catching me at a very interesting time in my life. I do consider myself one of the more successful DJs. I mean, just forget about the money part for a second. Like, I've done some really cool things, for sure. And I have them all stored in my memory banks. And I have pictures, thankfully, and some video and all those type of things. I guess, now that I am older, like I said, my main concern is spending enough time with my daughter and figuring out how to monetize what I do. And unfortunately, a lot of those things, it's really tough. It's really tough to figure that out. I was smart enough with my money when I was younger, as I think I said it when I was on it, right? I didn't buy an Escalade, bought a crib. So I have some nest egg to maneuver. I was, and hopefully this idea doesn't get taken by anybody. I don't think it will, but we are in the process of starting a English immersion DJ school in Japan, or that's what I was thinking about trying to do, which would allow me to still be involved in music on a level that I feel very happy about, and I can tuck my daughter in every night.
Very cool.
So that is the hope, and y'all can't take that idea. I'm doing it. But yeah, I don't think it.
Yeah.
This is in English, so I don't think the Japanese folk can even understand this. But yeah, basically, I have always been lucky enough to figure out some of the next moves. I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows?
Yeah.
But ultimately, if I end up having to take some sort of day job or do something, that's fine.
Yeah.
Because I need to take care of my daughter and my family, right? And I guess closing words, because we almost have time. Time's almost. So I have to go pick up Lily. I gotta go pick up Lily from school soon. I don't know. I think my generation was really interesting, right? Which I don't even know I don't know what I am. Am I a millennial? Am I a Gen Xer? I think I'm a Gen Xer, right? 1970s?
I think so,
right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of a weirdo because I stayed, right? All my friends are younger, like you, and yeah, most of my friends are a lot younger. I think my generation was the one that was told by our parents, like, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to become a doctor, you need to whatever, because their lives were extremely unstable. and they just want something better for their kids.
Yeah.
I think somewhat the younger generation has kind of gone overboard in the other direction, and they kept being told like you could do whatever you want, without, I don't even know if the word is, without proper intention, without proper planning. And so they don't even know what they really want, but they just don't want that 9 to 5. And they approach it incorrectly, and then they don't have money. And not of course, money is not everything. I know people who have great jobs and their lives are still miserable. And I know people who have stable jobs, right? Quote unquote stable jobs, not creative jobs. One of my homies, Jay Smoke, I was talking the other day when he was here in Hawaii, and he pivoted from DJing entirely years ago. He works in animation. He works for Disney. And I was like, yo, COVID messed us all up. And he was like, yeah, I know, man. But like, you know what, dude, to be honest, the way life is right now, like there was a while, like every day I was like, well, am I getting fired today? Am I getting laid off? We are in a very weird time right now. There's not a lot of stability for even people who should be stable. There's just not. I hope when people do decide to take an entrepreneurial, I butchered that, I knew I was gonna, but if they take that route, don't do it blind. You guys have Google now. You have the ability to research what is necessary, how to write a business plan, partner with the right people, not your homies. You're asking for problems if you're just getting your homie involved. You need the right people around you, and to do it smart, to do it with like the proper intention. And I think, you could be successful, you could not, but you'll learn, you'll grow as a person. And if that's the path you continue to do, like the next time you do it, maybe you learned enough to make it happen. I hope the people that do creative work plan for their future. I know a lot of my friends who strictly, like, for example, let's take the turntablism stuff. If that's all they did, they're screwed. Like, if they didn't start like I have my friends who, they love DJing, but they started like a wedding company. So that's, not guaranteed income, but people are getting married all the time. Like, so you got clients all the time. But the club that you DJ at is going to close. Your friends are not going to be in the same place at this, there's management changes all the time. Things move around that are just out of your control. So try to create a situation where you can maneuver around those situations and have something that you can say is stable. One of my buddies, it took him years, but that's what he now essentially is a wedding DJ, but he's got his situation where he knows I'm going to make at least 10 grand every month. That's amazing. As opposed to like, just being like, oh, well, I got a $300 gig that maybe COVID shuts your place down and that's it. Like you need to prepare for that. And I guess as I've gotten older and I often think about my daughter, what I'd want her to do. My daughter's in kind of a weird situation because she should be okay. She has to work very hard to screw up. But, I hope if she does want to do the creative path that she does it, with her head, not just her heart. I think a lot of people do that, and heart's only going to bring you so far.
Thank you so much for grounding us with that wisdom and also inspiring us with your amazing journey through life, and best of luck for your continued success as you continue to evolve your profession, your dharma. And before we end, where can people find you, follow you, buy your mixtapes?
That's easy. Thankfully, I was smart enough to, all my social media is just basically DJ Neil Armstrong, DJ Neilarmstrong. Instagram, Twitch. I'm on Twitch. My schedule's kind of crazy, but if you check my Instagram, it's usually there. Threads, X now, I guess they're calling it X. Yeah, social media. I do have a website, but I don't know if people go to websites anymore, to be honest. You can hear my stuff for free at mixcloud.com. If you go to my website, there's a direct link to all that. And yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, thank y'all. Peace.
I hope you enjoyed hearing Neil's journey as much as I loved being in the conversation. I appreciated his many pivots and transitions and his grounded wisdom he shared as lessons along his dharmic path and journey. It was so fascinating to hear how he took his craft of turntablism and continues to deliver it in so many different expressions. His story reminds us that change is inevitable, life circumstances happen, and one isn't just lucky, but that you can create your own luck. The luck he created was through the combination of seeing what's possible, taking initiative and action, making the right and aligned connections, with a sprinkle of serendipitous moments from the universe. A few key points and drops of knowledge that Neil shared for those of us listening and wanting to take in his wisdom include: build and maintain a strong foundation while pursuing your creative pursuits, whether that's part-time or full-time. Align yourself with like-minded people who knows the business side. Mentorship and advocates are crucial for success. Find ways to differentiate yourself apart from the crowd and think outside the box. If you're a creative, be open to and learn how to successfully pivot. Until next time, I'm Casey Conless, and see you on the next episode of the Hello Flow Pod. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode. If there's anything that resonated with you, please share it on Instagram and tag me at CaseyCan_ and at HelloFlow Collective. I would love to hear from you. As always, if you enjoy listening to what we discuss on the podcast, please share the show with friends who may also resonate. And don't forget to also subscribe, rate, and review. See you next time on the Hello Flow Podcast.